started writing Food for the Archons as a book of despair after watching my father die in 2013. During his transition, I experienced a series of paranormal and psychic events that left me feeling that I had either gone completely crazy or fell into humanity's darkest secret. I spent the next 5 years conducting extensive research, and I quickly learned that what I had experienced was real. My journey brought me to an understanding that showed me that despite the terrifying reality of an unseen predator, we as humans have a forgotten power. Just knowing this brings us tremendous hope in what once seemed a dark reality. I wrote this book for me in hopes of gaining a better understanding of our reality and relationship to it. But my hope is that you will find as much value in reading it as I did in writing it. I am Human, Food for the Archons, humanity's psychic connections, simulated realities, parallel worlds, and the manipulation of mankind. It's available on Amazon.com and at sixcentsmedia.net and wherever books are sold. I'm Dennis Nappy II, reminding you to let your intuition be your guide. Thank you.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong in the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there.
There is a lot happening very fast in the world right now, particularly in the United States. It's having a ripple effect throughout the world. Is this part of a larger plan? Is this part of a larger conspiracy, as everyone likes to think? I'm speaking specifically about some of the things that we're seeing with Elon Musk. And I promise I'm not going to get political on this podcast, on this platform. It's something I never try to explore. However, I do think there's some implications from the realm of human consciousness and where our society and civilization might be going. And I want to share some threads that have popped out at me over the last couple of weeks. Ironically, last show I was talking about, past couple of shows I've been talking about all of the noise that's out there, all of the chatter between, we're being bombarded. And I think this is a little bit I will talk about with the things that are coming out, particularly with USAID. The amount of intentional noise and distraction and manipulation that exists. Now, many of us are aware that this happens, right? The mainstream media has their talking lines. It's very clear which outlet leans this way, which one leans this way, which one gets completely shut down because they don't like what they're saying. Then you have the alternative media. And I guess I would count as a very, very, very tiny fish in the alternative media, simply because I have a voice and a microphone and an internet connection, which anyone can do. But I suspect that many of us, many of everything has been manipulated and influenced. And what, for those of you that aren't tracking this, and I'm going to shift in a minute to consciousness and mind control and all that stuff. I got some really good things I want to reference tonight. This is an important show. But what's going on right now, we've known for a long time that Russia, that China, and even North Korea, when I say we've known, sources claiming to have access to information from our government have told us that these foreign agencies have been influencing us primarily nowadays through social media. Social media is such a wonderfully powerful tool, but we have lost control with how to use it and how to implement it. And that is because of the algorithm and those behind the algorithm and AI, really. But AI that is being guided and controlled right now by human minds and human intentions. I don't think there's a free AI right now that is telling us what to do. There's rule sets. As I wrote about in Food for the Archons, I've talked about on this show at times how years ago I wrote that book. I don't know, when did I publish it? 2018, but that part was written probably 2016, 2017. That AI can look at your algorithm and start creating a feedback loop that reinforces the things that you're looking at. Whether it's true or not, it can find articles on it. And furthermore, what it can do is it can create fake stories that resonate with what you're reading and reinforce those ideas and those values. And you can even create millions of fake stories and disseminate them across people who fit your digital profile and then find out which ones work the best with people who match our personality type. One of the things that people think is so strange. And the phones might be listening to us. Maybe they are. But beyond that, another tactic that I heard in one of those documentaries was that they identify your doppelgangers, people who digitally look just like you, therefore are living similar lifestyles. And that's why when we're going through something and without talking about it, all of a sudden we start getting ads for it. It's possible that it's just predicting us, but it's possible that it's looking at all of our doppelgangers out there and going, oh, this demographic who thinks like this is looking at purchasing something like this today. We're going to throw this ad in his direction. So there's a lot going on. The algorithms are very smart. But what USAID, what they're talking about with USAID is, the various programs that have been used really for what is regime change. And they take some time. There's a big one that's come out. It's been on a couple of podcasts talking about Cuba specifically, where they went in and they created um, a platform basically that was Twitter, but they weren't. Twitter was banned in Cuba when this happened, but they created a platform that was basically Twitter, and the goal of the platform was like to give them weather updates, emergency updates, and maybe to connect with people. And then once they hit a critical mass of people, that's when they started hitting it with the political ideologies in order to win the hearts and minds of people and sway them in a direction of thought. I spent a lot of time in Food for the Archons trying to show how susceptible we are to mind control through natural means, through technological means, through intuitive means, and really how susceptible we are to manipulation when you look at things like the Milgram experiment. Um, we have to be very careful of our minds and where they're going. And I say this because I'm at a point where I question the things that I stand for or the things that I'm pursuing, the things that I'm saying publicly to all of you. Um, where's it coming from? Is it coming from me? Is it coming from some rogue psychic signal or from the system itself that wants me to do certain things? Is it coming from, am I getting ideas through the internet, through a particular government that or organization that wants me to drive thought, whatever small part that I may play? Um, so that's something I've always tried to be mindful of. In 2016, I did this podcast called The Trump Effect, talking a lot about this and how things are contagious and spread. These thought viruses can spread. So here we are again. Now we have a new a new executive lead here, and a lot is changing really, really fast, and all these things are coming out. Why am I sharing all of that? Why am I going off on this little piece? I want to be clear. I'm going over headlines right now, basically. I'm not doing a deep dive into this stuff. I also understand that everything that's coming out may not be an accurate representation of what's really going on. I think that there's a misrepresentation of facts from, we'll say, both sides of this. But at the end of the day, I think there's corruption fighting corruption. What's the end goal here? And I don't even know about the end goal. But that's what I want to talk about. And if you follow the work at the Future Forecasting Group, they've done phenomenal work. Futureforecastinggroup.com. Yes, that's a plug because the work we do with that company is absolutely incredible. Using remote viewing and incorporating information from a variety of sources to work in conjunction with our data to provide analysis of what's going on in the world. And what we're looking at is a transfer into really a new system of administration on the planet. And one of the means of doing that, one of the big means of doing that, is a transfer of a new to a new financial system. And what goes with that is all the technology that comes with that, right? You have, we're talking about cryptocurrencies, but and the goal of crypto initially, well, the goal of crypto is financial freedom. It's something that is decentralized, meaning, there's no one person that's in control of Bitcoin, right? They can't control it. I should have access to it. I protect my passcodes, my seed words, and nobody should be able to get to it. Some of these central bank digital currencies that they might come out with may be a different story, but we might be moving to some kind of everything's within the digital realm. In a lot of ways, this is very beneficial. It will, and they even said it. Musk and Trump even said it. Like this transition is going to be painful for a lot of us, and I believe that. I think it's going to be very hard. I think we're in those hard times. I don't say that to be scary. I think knowledge is power, but the right kind of knowledge is power. And I don't say that meaning like I've got this special information. I mean, are we going down threads that just scare the crap out of us, and it doesn't really serve us because there's no action steps we can take from it. So I think we need to be careful in our pursuit of knowledge with a goal of being able to take action steps based on that knowledge, or simply if you want to be entertained, some entertainment too. Um, but as we transfer this new system, like, okay, we've got this new money system, but with that, there's an infrastructure that needs to come with that. And with the work that future forecasting has done with the remote viewers taking these dives into these crypto companies and the teams behind them, and their connections to governments or non-government organizations, that web has been in the works for a very long time now. The infrastructure has been laid out quite clearly with where this to support this new system. Everything is going to be out there. Um, it will be far more efficient in terms of like some of the things that Elon Musk is talking about. He says there's this underground bunker in this old mine in Pennsylvania. People retire from the military, from the government. They got to go down there, ride an elevator, and they got to get the files. And so it's dependent on, he said, how fast the elevator can move. Right. So he's painting this picture. Let's think problem, reaction, solution, right? Of here's how broken it is. Here's how bad the system is. We can get everything uploaded and you can retire in a matter of minutes, really, once the AI gets going and doing these things, is what I suspect is going to be said eventually. But I think that's where we're moving. As this old system crumbles, then we're going to have to adapt to it. And then we're going to beg for the new system because everything's going to be so hard. And we're going to get this new thing that's going to offer us, probably going to offer us money, probably going to offer a more efficient way to live and exist. I'm not addressing all the other scary things. I know there's a lot of other things, some true, some not so true, in my opinion, that people are worried about. I want to look beyond that for a minute and just understanding, okay, we've got this infrastructure. I've talked a lot about my thoughts on the bigger pictures of that infrastructure. AI is going to play a role, but what else is going to play a role? I've pulled 3 separate conversations that I'm going to play via YouTube on this podcast. I'm going to play short clips of each one and provide commentary. The first one is coming from Elon Musk. He did a talk at West Point in 2024. He mentioned something called conceptual telepathy that I want to talk about. And when this is using technology to transfer entire concept. It's fascinating what he says, also concerning. And he talks about Starlink as well, and communication. These things are all important in terms of what's going on. And then ultimately he makes a tie into Mars, which I want to talk about, a project that we were just a part of. And then we've got James Giordano. I've talked about this guy multiple times, this specific talk, because this talk I think is so incredibly important, from 2018. I think he was at West Point at the military academy. And he's talking about technology that will impact your brain, the nanotechnology that will impact your brain. I want to talk about that as well. And I have some clips that are terrifying, really, when you think about it. They're terrifying. This is not I want to spread fear. This is not the end is coming. This is, hey, here's what I think is happening and how do we navigate this? All right. I really don't want to come off scary. And then I'm going to share my conversation, clips of my conversation that I had with Edward. This is the first talk I had and first contact I had with what is now the Future Forecasting Group. This is the podcast that I say regularly, changed my life. It opened me up to this trajectory that I'm on right now. And there's so much in that podcast. And I only pulled a few clips, or I will be pulling a few clips from a span of 10 to 20 minutes on an over an hour long conversation. It's still, dare I say this, it's still up on my YouTube channel. And I believe Edward has it posted on his Rumble account. I'm not familiar with Rumble. His channel, because it has a lot more attention than mine, it got taken down. This is an important conversation. So I'm going to talk about that when I get to that as well, and where I think it's leading. There's a lot of noise right now. There's a lot of scary things. We're in that shock and awe phase, but I think we need to try our best to think multiple moves ahead. What's the end game? Where is this going? And how can I put myself in a position? Who is it? I was just listening to someone else talk. I'm quoting someone else. I can't remember who it was. I think I was listening to either on Joe Rogan's podcast or on Sean Ryan's podcast, and they said, Wayne Gretzky, the famous hockey player, says, they said, "How are you so fast?" He says, "I don't look where the puck is. I skate to where the puck is going." And I think that is highly relevant right now. Um, let's skate to where the puck is going, and I think we can find the tools to navigate this, even though it sounds pretty scary. So I'm going to bring up a few things, and we're gonna dissect these. Okay, so here's Elon Musk talking at West Point on the future of warfare.
How do you envision this evolution? And I think this might get to Neuralink. How do you see this evolution between the human, who maybe can't be at the front any longer, the technologies at the front, yet keeping them integrated and synchronized? Like, how is that going to work in your mind?
I mean, so communications is essential. Like, it is actually very important to have space-based communications that cannot be intercepted, which is Starlink, what Starlink offers. Starlink is the backbone of the Ukrainian military communication system, because it can't be blocked by the Russians. Essentially, it's the only thing that can't be. So on the front lines, all the fiber connections are cut, the cell towers are blown up, and the geostationary satellite links are jammed. The only thing that isn't jammed is Starlink. So it's the only thing. And then GPS is also jammed. The GPS signal is very faint, but Starlink can offer location capability as well. So it is a strategic advantage that's very significant. And when you're trying to communicate with the drones need to, like, basically, they need to know where they are, and they need to receive instructions. So if you don't have communications and positioning, then the drones don't work. So
Now,
that's quite important. It's essential.
But you find it important that there's still that communication between the human and the machine or the drone.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, there's like, it's a different question of like, where are things like right now versus where will things be in 10 years? But I have to say, I do look at the future with some trepidation. I have to have some deliberate suspension of disbelief to sleep sometimes, because I think we're headed into a pretty wild future. And I'm naturally an optimistic person. So, but AI is going to be so good, including localized AI. I mean, at the current rates, you'll have, something that's sort of rock level AI, probably that can be run on a drone. And so you could literally say, this is the equipment that the drone needs to destroy. Go into that thing, it'll recognize what equipment needs to be destroyed and take it out.
It's a lot of your work.
All right, I'm going to stop here for that portion of the conversation with Elon Musk, and just point out what he's talking about, the importance of communication. Now, again, we've got these problems, right? There's a lot of weird stuff going on with the Ukraine war and the way that's being rolled out. But he said all fiber optics are cut, all communication landlines are cut. The only way they can communicate securely is through Starlink. It can't be hacked by the Russians, he's saying, and the other key piece here is he's tying in drones. This is how the drones can operate through Starlink, because it gives them geopositioning and it gives them the signal to communicate what's needed. And he's basically saying eventually, within the next 10 years, they will have autonomous drones run by AI, because they're going to have a targeting package inside of their minds in terms of this is what is acceptable for you to kill. So that's a pretty scary thing. And Elon, he's not shy about saying how he's nervous about AI, which is why he wants to connect the mind with Neuralink. And I think that's important to note as well. But the big piece here is the Starlink portion. Now, Starlink, I suspect the goal is for it to be everywhere. It's up in the sky, but now what are they doing? T-Mobile, at the Super Bowl of all places, launched an ad, and until I think July, they're offering free Starlink internet service for all T-Mobile users. T-Mobile is a major carrier for cell phone service here in the United States, and they're giving it out for free right now. Get people addicted. Who knows? Will there be a crisis at some point where we're going to need to tap into Starlink, i.e., North Carolina. Now, there was different things coming out about some of the problems with it, some of those problems being cost and having to pay for it, or for the equipment in order to run it. But there's an infrastructure coming in here now. What if all normal landlines, fiber optic type infrastructure gets cut down, gets shut down, and Starlink is all that's left? I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm saying we're in the process of now of connecting seemingly everything through Starlink. Now, what else is Elon Musk doing? He's going through the government, different agencies, line by line by line, requesting access to various types of information. I don't know what he's doing with it. I don't know how he's connecting it. I know I got to go back and review these sessions. The Future Forecasting Group has looked at Doge. They have looked at Elon Musk specifically. I recommend checking out those sessions. That's my homework over the next couple of days to go back and review those things, because I think they're important. I think they're very telling. But are we connecting this? Are really what I'm asking, and I hate this in a scary way, are we creating some kind of Skynet? Or, as I'm going to play in the next clip, we're creating the Matrix, or both. Um, I don't know. And I hate to sound fear-mongering and scary, but there's just so many things that are coming out right now that seem sci-fi that are actually happening in front of us. So I'm going to pull up the next portion of this same conversation with Elon Musk talking about the mind and Neuralink. All right, here's Elon talking about AI and Neuralink and the processing speed, really, of the human mind.
It really goes into pretty wild speculation. I think to some degree that the AIs, I think, will want humans as a source of will. So if you think of how the human mind works, there's the limbic system and the cortex, your kind of base instincts and the sort of thinking and planning part of your brain. But you also have a tertiary layer already, which is all of the electronics that you use, your phones, computers, applications. So you already sort of have three layers of intelligence. But all of those, the cortex and the machine intelligence, your sort of cybernetic third layer, is trying to make the limbic system happy, because the limbic system is a source of will. So there's some, it might be that the AIs just want to make the humans happy. And part of what Neuralink's trying to do is improve the communication bandwidth between the cortex and the digital tertiary layer, because our output bandwidth of a human is less than 1 bit per second per day. There's 86,400 seconds in a day. You don't output 86,400 tokens. So, but like the number of words that I can say at this forum, say just look at it from an information theory standpoint. How much information am I able to convey? Not that much, because I can only say a few number of words. And in order to convey an idea, I have to take a concept in my head, I have to compress it down to a small number of words, try to aspirationally model how you would decompress those words into concepts in your own mind. That's communication. So your brain is doing a lot of compression, decompression, and then has a very small output bandwidth. Neuralink can increase that bandwidth by several orders of magnitude. And also, you don't have to spend as much time compressing thoughts into a small number of words. You can do conceptual telepathy. That is the idea behind Neuralink. It is intended to be a mitigation against AI existential risk. You talk about a lot.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. I'm going to try to consolidate it. And that statement right there is very relevant for me personally in things that I'm exploring in my own life. As a remote viewer, I was just part of a big remote viewing project looking at the lost civilization of Mars. And some of the psychic stuff that he was just talking about, I think, is very relevant that I want to speak on as well. One of the things he talked about is he said AI is going to, keep us around for will, and he said, he thinks AI might just want to keep us happy. That could be a scary thing. Just because you're getting dumped with dopamine and happy doesn't mean bad things aren't happening around you or you're losing. Are we at risk of losing our sense of autonomy? That's what concerns me about connecting your mind to the chip, to Neuralink, putting a Neuralink circuit in your brain. So then it's going to connect to what? Starlink up in the sky that's connected to everything, that's connected to drones. We might not have access, that level of access to it. Um, but what he talked about was conceptual telepathy. Now, in remote viewing, one of the things I've been experiencing, and I'd say before remote viewing, this goes back to if you've read my first book, I'm Human and We're Not Who We Think We Are. That started for me with what I was calling a download, and other people use that term as well. And I remember one day I was standing in my backyard and I got hit with these ideas, and it kept me up at night. And like I really was so stressed out because I couldn't understand what I was trying to articulate. I knew the concept. Reality is not what you think it is. There's more going on in the world. All these things were running through my head, but I didn't understand fully the extent of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Like 2 a.m., I ran to my office and I sat down. I just started writing and I banged out like it felt like automatic writing, a 9-page essay to flesh everything out. And as if that wasn't enough, I'm still, and again, this is why I get so emotional when I watch that Close Encounters movie where he's crying and he's making mashed potatoes because he has to interpret this signal that was implanted in his brain, good or bad, to make the mashed potatoes into the mountaintop that was an iconic symbol where the ship was going to come land, needed to go be a part of that experience. That was mind control, is what that was. But it was so, it felt so important to him. Same way this essay felt so important to me to write out this 9-page essay. I then spent the entire summer making a movie about it twice because the first time the movie got deleted, my hard drive froze and I lost everything and I had to go back and do it again. My point is I had this obsession from this information packet that came in, but then took me weeks, months, and I'll say years because then I had to further unpack it in Food for the Archons, which took me another 5 years of research to write to try to explain everything that was in there. And I'd say it's still not fully out because I'm still on this podcast trying to understand things that I learned in that initial download. What Elon Musk is talking about is conceptual telepathy. Right now, he says there's only so many words that our mind is capable of processing and we're capable of speaking in a given amount of time. To increase that speed, we're not, he even called it tokens as outputs. I mean, think about how he's looking at the human mind and human potential as tokenized. That's a cryptocurrency term. So now we're looking at thought. Instead of me transmitting to all of you the words that I'm saying right now, I want you to listen to the Seeker podcast because today I'm talking about mind control. What he's talking about is conceptual telepathy. In remote viewing, sometimes I'll look at an ideogram and I see the whole story, but then it takes me a while to unpack all those data points and translate the concept that I now understand into the written word that I can then make as a product for the consumer to look at, to read, and to review. So conceptual telepathy is broadcasting the entire packet of what you want, the thoughts, the feelings, the details, everything in there, and the recipient understanding it and not having to waste time having a conversation about it. That level of communication speed, multiply that by a hive mentality supported by AI. When we're thinking about the massive impact of a brain like that, how can we compete with something like that? And that's why Elon Musk says we have to join with AI. I'm not saying that's what we need to do. And I'm not going to get into this just yet, but if you listen to the telepathy tapes, I suspect we already have an option of how to join our own human connection, our own human hive. I think it exists, but it's so drowned out by the constant stories that we're flooding our minds with. Okay, but I do think the timing of the telepathy tapes coming out right now is no accident given where we are. We're at a precipice point, I suspect, with what's going on with technology and the government. Okay. One more thing I want to comment on with Musk, and that's just because I mean, I don't know if it's a plug or what, but he says, like Mars, SpaceX, he likes Mars, and he says SpaceX exists to make us multiplanetary, and he wants to go to Mars. He wants to build a city on Mars. And I talked through the future forecasting group. We just did a down the rabbit hole project, our first one. It was amazing. For me, it was probably one of the most powerful remote viewing sessions I ever did personally, looking at the lost civilization of Mars and how that civilization ended. On my first session, basically what happened is this large meteor came down and wiped everything out, and I tracked the civilization. I tracked a woman as she went underground into this fallout shelter. That was ancient. There was ancient technology. For them, it was ancient. But what happened was there was she's sitting in her home, and all of a sudden her and so many other of these beings get up and leave their homes and they just start walking on command. Not because they wanted to. It was a signal that went out to their minds and projected them forward, and they just went and they knew where to go. It's like they were being guided. It was like almost like if you've ever seen or read The Stand. Mother Abigail and Randall Flagg were sending these signals out to good versus evil, and they were guiding people to different spots through intuitively, right? But this was much more powerful. These people, I describe them as like zombie-like. Now, that signal also could have been a cell phone alert if they had cell phones, or something on the TV or their broadcast communications network that said, hey, there's a comet about to hit and you're all going to die and there's nothing you can do about it. That level of trauma, I think, would also create a zombie-like march. Maybe it'll create panic, but maybe it would create this just, oh my gosh, this is awful. So I give that caveat. I digress. But I think it's important to note that there's these elements of mind control pieces. And one of the data points that I wrote down in my session, I said, I feel that it's important to note that this exists on Earth today with humanity, but is only used on a small scale. The only way it can be used in a large scale is if there is a facing a global catastrophe or a global event where they need to organize and move masses of people very quickly and efficiently. Again, take that with a grain of salt. That is remote viewing data. And also, it could be my imagination because I am a science fiction writer who has written specifically about a hive mind. Okay, so I need to give that caveat, but I think it's interesting to note and to talk about. All right, I'm going to move on to James Giordano. This guy's talks. I've watched this several times, and it always scares me. This is the condensed version. I believe he's speaking at West Point. I'm going to pull that up in just a second, and we can listen to what he has to say. Okay, here we go.
What we're here to talk about today is the fact that the brain is and will be the 21st century battlescape in many ways. End of story. You will encounter some form of neurocognitive science that has been weaponized not only in your military career, but in your personal and professional lives. It is valid, valuable, and already in operational play. The brain is the current and future battle space. What's new about this is the in-close nature of this. Increasingly, we're not seeing these things as weapons of mass destruction against gross aspects of the population.
I'm looking at this. I'm going to pause this for 1 second. I'm looking at, number one, he says, the mind is the new battlefield. You will experience this in your personal and professional lives. Looking at this here, he's talking about novel neuroweapons, drugs and bugs. In close, because he doesn't read this per se, but in close pharmaceuticals and organic neurotoxins, ultra low dose, high specify agents for use in targeting diplomatic and local culture, hearts and minds scenarios. Now, what was I talking about at the beginning of this? USAID and them using social media as one means of influencing a population to drive, to win hearts and minds, to change elections, to bring about regime change, to further an agenda. We've got high morbidity biological or biologic agents with high neuropsychiatric symptom clusters for public panic and public health disintegrative effects. Public panic, health disintegrative effects. Okay, has that happened? Is that happening? It's quite possible. Gene-edited microbiologicals with novel morbidity, mortality profiles. And he talks about narrow neuroparticle agents, high CNS aggression, lead, carbon, silicate nanofibers, a network of disruptors, or neurovascular hemorrhagic agents for in-close and population use as stroke epidemic induction agents. Weren't there a lot of people with blood clots and strokes during COVID? All right, let's continue on and hear what James Giordano has to say. Let's move to him talking about nanotech.
It is becoming an international, multinational, global, and independently exercised event and endeavor, which increases the capability of the brain sciences to develop not only new theories, but ever more sophisticated tools. So, how then can we use these elements as weapons? means of contending against others. Formal definition of a weapon, probably the one that you've heard about most recently, most contemporaneously in the literature, is the possibility to use some form of directed energy to affect physiology peripherally and also to affect the physiology and health of the brain. Case in point here, US Embassy personnel in Havana and possibly in China. Clearly, one of the things we can also do is transcranial.
Before I move past that, what he's talking about is the Havana syndrome. The Hellfire Group did a project where we looked at Havana syndrome, and it was some mind control weird stuff. I remember my session was looking at really creating some kind of Manchurian candidate. What Havana syndrome has done is caused a lot of brain damage to a lot of government officials. All right, here we go.
Cranial neuromodulation, the idea of going through the skull to modulate the node and network activity of the brain, to implant certain brain-machine interfaces. These are many of the DARPA programs that you may hear of now. Probably the one that is most notorious is something called the N3 program, which is the non-invasive neurosurgical neuromodulation program being run by their program manager, Dr. Al Mundy. The idea here is to put minimal-sized electrodes in a network within a brain through only minimal intervention to be able to read and write into the brain function in real time, remotely. And then, of course, you also have the things that are a little bit more traditional. If we talk about things that can be operable in the biochemical space, we ordinarily talk about drugs, bugs, toxins, and ever more, we're considering devices. I can disrupt an individual from the level of their cell to their system, and disrupt individuals on a variety of levels, from individuals all the way up to the social fabric. Target a specific individual, change or eliminate that individual with very little attribution and trace, and be able to leave prior to any attribution.
All right, so again, we're talking about means of accessing the brain to manipulate people and ultimately to kill people if that's what the goal is. What's scary is, I wanted to talk this week about one of the things that's been going through my mind lately is what makes me me. I've had this conversation several times. I know it's a meditation exercise that people go through where you start unraveling the layers of yourself so you can finally get to the self. But what I've learned over the years, starting with this rabbit hole of thought I had that back in 2009, dissecting reality, is if who I am are my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, what does that say if my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are susceptible to influence, manipulation, and control? That's a much larger question, and it's kind of a scary one, but let's hear what he has to say about that.
Influence the postures that go to you in terms of insurance, care, viability for military service. By altering that information, by changing those data, by purloining those data, I essentially changed the you of you. And I
essentially changed the you of you by altering all this stuff that impacts your medical records that's going to impact your life.
can do that in very subtle and insidious ways. Furthermore, I can do that on a variety of different levels that can affect key individuals so that, in fact, your medical record changes to thereby render you incapable or at least invalid to be able to serve in a way you're serving. Or I can do that on a much larger scale, groups, populations. And if I change those data, I change the way you're being regarded and treated. And I can do that in one of two ways. I can do it in such a way that you're going to be regarded in a negative sense, or I can do that in such a way that I'm going to treat you incorrectly. If I say, for example, you have a particular allergy or you have a particular disorder, you will be treated for that, and that could then harm your health and your stability in both.
Does that sound relevant? Being treated for things that you might not need to be treated for, injecting things in your body that might not necessarily serve you and may cause problems down the road, or who knows what they're injecting into you. Something I want to point out here on his slide here, hybrid cyborg system or biological drones. I don't think he really talks about that in this clip that I'm playing. I believe he does overall, but really I suspect that's connecting directly the mind to these drone technologies, which we've seen movies about all that stuff. All right, the last thing I'm going to play here, it's coming up in the next 5 to 10 seconds, about nanodust.
The short wars approach as well as a long wars approach. One of the newest developments is that nanoparticulate matter can be stabilized for distribution. If you're not aware of what nanoparticulate matter is, it's that matter which exists on a scale of 1 × 10⁻⁹. Very, very small. Smaller than a cell. And we can manufacture materials that have discrete properties that can be controlled by virtue of bioengineering and their physical chemistry. I can create small robotic units, controllable robotic units at the nanoscale, and that these too can be aerosolized to create a nanoswarm of biopenetrable materials that you cannot see, that can penetrate all but the most robust biochemical filters, that are able to integrate themselves through a variety of membranes, mucous membranes, and wherever, mouth, nose, ears, eyes, can be then uptaken into the vascular system to create clumping, can affect the vascular system of the brain, or can directly diffuse into the brain space, and these can be weaponized. And they can be done in such a level that their presence is almost impossible to detect, and as such, the attribution becomes exceedingly difficult to demonstrate. We've come to the...
Okay. Basically what he's talking about is nanoparticles that are so tiny, 10 to the minus ninth. I'm not a scientist. Very, very tiny. They can be ingested, inhaled, and go into the blood and cause blood clots and kill you. They can go into the brain and wreak all sorts of other types of havoc, and who knows what else they could do. They get past just about every single filter that's out there. He said they're virtually undetected. It could be sent out like a mist into the sky. Okay, I'm going to share something that obviously I cannot prove. Correlation does not mean that this, in fact, is what's happening. And I realize that I'm cherry picking information out there, but I think it's curious. Many people have been reporting seeing these drone sightings, which it's no question that the official story that came out is a load of crap. There's something else going on. Some of the things that are being witnessed by these drones are unexplainable or difficult to explain. And there's plenty of conversations going on. I don't need to go through all of that. People very close to me, whom I trust, have confided in me and have sent me video that I'm not able to share here. Sorry, I know that sounds awful, but have sent me video and told me they have personally seen the mist coming out of the drones. Drones were spraying some kind of mist in the air. And I don't think there's video of the mist coming out anywhere that I've seen, but multiple people have been reporting these drones spraying these mists. I just did a Google search, and the only story I found, and it was just a quick search, I didn't spend a ton of time, but the only story I found, here, let me share my screen. I found two stories, or I found one story, excuse me, that's relevant, but the wording of it is curious. Let's go here. I'm going to share this story in a minute, but my Google search here, I wrote drone spraying mist. Drones-based water spraying launched to mitigate air pollution. Drone spraying mist, new stunt to check bad air in Delhi. These are all things that are not addressing the drones that we're seeing on the East Coast of the United States. They're all valid reasons why drones would spray mist. Look at all the results that came back. The top headline here, police investigate report of drone spraying gray mist. So, but it was later identified as a commercial airplane. So nope, conspiracy theorists shut down. Is that a little bit suspicious, or am I just some crazy tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist? Because we know that the algorithms never get hacked and they don't filter the information they're sending to us, i.e. what we're talking about with USAID. There is some kind of cover-up happening here with the drones. Maybe this will get me banned now too. There's nothing on the first page that comes up about these drones except for one story, and they use the word conspiracy theorist. Okay, so again, when you hear the word conspiracy theory, it's like, we're going to talk about this, but it's probably you crazy wackadoos that are out there. We just heard the world's leading neurobiologist talking about the technology that exists today, but they're going to say these are just crazy conspiracy theorists. So this is from the New York Post. This is from January 4th, 2025, written by Brooke Cato. Americans alarmed by chemical fog spreading across the U.S. Phenomenon sparks bioweapon conspiracy theories after drone sightings. Okay. New year, new conspiracy theories. Listen to that opening line right there. Parts of the U.S. have been blanketed by mysterious fog, sparking concern from locals who claim it has a chemical smell and exposure can result in flu-like symptoms. A Florida resident told the Daily Mail that they felt sick after being outside in the fog for just 10 minutes. Within about an hour, I kept sneezing over and over for about 3 hours, and my eyes were really puffy, the unnamed Floridian claimed. I got very warm, and I felt like I had a fever, and my stomach was cramping. Okay, I'm I'm trying not to go too deep on a crazy rabbit hole right now. That's the first I've read that article. Um, I'm doing some of this research. I had stuff prepared, but some of this I'm doing live as I'm going through this. I'm pausing, I'm doing searches and stuff to pull up information. During COVID, I was freaked out, obviously, about what was going on, and the clips I'm about to play next, coming from Edward and his cue ball sessions. We call it cue ball, so hopefully the algorithm doesn't catch it. Um, from his cue ball sessions was really in my head. And, it came down to really this tiny nanotech that gets in your head and takes over. In my book, at that time, wasn't sure what I could share based on number one, what needs to stay behind the security of our paywall at then crypto viewing. Number two, what's dangerous to put out there that's going to get me blacklisted or arrested or targeted and all this stuff. It was really a hard time. So I wrote a book of fiction called The Hive. It's a series that, two books are out, the third one's in the works. And I promise it's not a shameless plug here. I wrote that book much like when I had that download of information from the night in 2009 that led to my I Am Human series. The Hive is my way of processing all of this type of information without having to worry about fact checking. It's stress free. I can use fiction and I can explore these concepts and it doesn't have to be real. And that is a way to help ease my anxiety as I go through something. So I take many things in my life, and then I can fill in the holes with what I think, whatever comes to mind, and just process this whole concept, right? Elon Musk talks about, transmitting conceptual telepathy. This takes me a long time to flush these ideas out, write down the words, type them out, edit it, publish it, and put it out there. But what I just read here, within an hour, I kept sneezing, oh my God, over and over for about 3 hours, and my eyes were really puffy. I got very warm, and I felt like I had a fever, is what she wrote. That's the first. I hit the pause button. That is the first I'm reading that. All right, I'm sharing this. I don't know why because it's an odd coincidence here. Okay, this book was published years ago, and I'm going to read an excerpt from it. I promise I'm not trying to do this shameless plug here, but I just think this is very interesting here, and maybe I don't know, maybe I'm just in my head. This is from the first chapter of the book. Without warning, she wrinkled her nose, causing strands of her blonde hair to fall in front of her face. Her head tilted back and she sneezed hard, spraying outward and upward. As Edward made eye contact, his face was greeted with the warm mist of spit and snot escaping the woman's nose and mouth. The taste of salt rested on Edward's tongue as his mouth was opened to receive the full benefit of expulsion from the woman's nostrils. He blinked his eyes repeatedly as tears filled them to flush the woman's mucus from his eyes. Moving on, shortly after that, I'm skipping ahead here. Um, at the end of the aisle, he turned and made his way towards the checkout counter. Achoo, he heard from behind him as a man sneezed hard. Edward flinched, still tasting the salt from the sneeze on his tongue. Then, coming from the aisle to his right, he heard another chew, followed by several more throughout the store. People were sneezing in unison, and with each sneeze, three more followed. There was weight behind those sneezes, not just air passing through their nostrils, and Edward shuddered as the sneezing continued. Throughout the store, I wrote snore here. I found a typo. A collective sniffle was heard, echoing, repeating, and growing in number and strength. People were covering their faces, and as long flows of the greenish-yellow mucus and snot hung from their noses and drained from their mouths. They began coughing and choking on their snot, and not a single person seemed unaffected. They were crouching over their carts, spraying their thickness over everything and everyone near them. All right, I can stop there, plugging my own writing here, but listen, that didn't happen here. That did not happen here. It's a work of science fiction, but it's based on the ideas that I'm getting from this. And now what I'm piecing together is what he's saying, James, because I missed this years ago. James Giordano is saying that this mist is possible to be placed out in the air. And now we've got these people claiming that there's this fog out there and it's making them sneeze crazy. And the point of this is in my book, they were infected with nanotech. And as that tech was activated, it causes this release of all of these dead cells in their bodies, and it, helps to spread things as their brain chemistry is being infected by nanotechnology. And again, this is all fiction, infected by nanotechnology, which then connects them to the hive, is what had happened there. So that's a scary coincidence, given the topic that I'm having, but I need to give a ton of caveats. I'm cherry picking information right now. But even that information, I think everything I've shared today can stand on its own as pretty scary. The thread I'm weaving here may not necessarily be an accurate analysis, and I want to be clear about that. I'm going to share some of Edward's stuff here before I wrap up the show. And I want to be clear. Edward said multiple times, and I'll have the link for you to listen to this whole podcast. He said multiple times that this information needs to be taken with a grain of salt. Right now, it's just interesting remote viewing data, but let's not hit the panic button over it. I'm pulling out threads that are relevant to what I'm talking about right now, but I do not ever want to misrepresent Edward and his work, which he takes very seriously. And he was very, very clear during this that take it with a grain of salt. This can be interpreted so many different ways. Okay, I want to be clear in that. I want to honor the work that he does with respect, and I want to make sure I'm not making the case that Edward said this, so that means that this is going to happen. That is not what I'm saying at all. With that being said, his data is very curious in the things that we share in this conversation. Okay, here's Edward talking about the signal that's coming out of this. What he was tasked with was to review the entity known as cue ball, and he got none of the stuff that was in the popular conspiracy threads. And ultimately, he got this. It's been a while since I've looked at all of this, but he got this breakaway civilization that was creating this tiny technology, really, that had an influence on consciousness, is what it sounds like. So here he's talking about the signal. This is just my own ego chiming in. It's an old recording. I had a different setup back then. I was still, I'd say, green as a podcaster. But it is what it is. But so him and I were talking on the phone here. We weren't even using Zoom at this point. That's how far back it's going. Let's play this before it gets taken down. Okay.
That it followed through into the rest of them. So I'm not sure, because what I was experiencing of that later was more of a signal, a Wi-Fi type of signaling that was affecting people. Mm-hmm. There were satellites that were broadcasting something. And the satellites themselves, they felt like they were run by artificial intelligence.
So it was an AI-run satellite that was putting out some kind of signal. That's
what I was experiencing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, that's how we started this conversation, talking about Starlink being up in the sky. Is Starlink what Edward was seeing? Really, we don't have the feedback right now. So again, using caution, we do not panic over this, right? This is a possible correlation, but we're not there yet in the timeline. But it is a very interesting correlation, to say the least here. Let's move on to the next clip that I want to pull here. And this is going to talk about nanotechnology. Oh, you know what? Nope, there's one more before that one about this broadcast. This is the broadcast here.
And it would go live.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was experiencing was these waves of like a broadcast going out in waves and hitting people, hitting everything.
Right.
And then the living things, the people, being affected by these signals. The signals were very interesting to me. I wanted to explore them more. I wanted to experience them more because they were very interesting to me. And so as I was attempting to experience and describe them, I was getting these notions of problem solving,
Mm-hmm.
of correcting things, and that was like, again, it was into this realm of where this feeling like you take all recorded information that humans have collected and you give an artificial intelligence access to it, and it can crunch all of that information. It can scan something and find all of its problems that are detectable and offer solutions to that equation.
Right.
I could keep playing this and go on, but I'm trying to be mindful of everybody's time. It's every word he says is fascinating. But what's he ultimately saying? AI is solving your problems for you. We just played a clip taken in 2024 of Elon Musk saying he thinks AI will want to keep people happy. I'm just making these connections now. Like I knew I wanted to talk about these things, but I didn't make that connection until I'm listening to this right now. This conversation is very near and dear to my heart. Um, I'm not saying that's what's happening, but it is an interesting coincidence that Musk just said in 2024, it'll keep you happy. Now, he goes on a little bit further to talk about that, um, eh, talking about, we're going to get to it in a few clips, but he's talking about leadership. You know what? Let's jump ahead. Let's jump ahead, and then I'll jump back with what the order I wanted to go in. Sorry, I'm doing this live here. 118. Sorry, guys. Okay.
Plan that is in place to bring on something much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if, in my own mind, the exposing of all of these leaders as for what they are,
Yeah.
Imperfect, flawed human beings, is part of the process of offering the solution of an unbiased, non-sexual, non-greedy intelligence that can draw its conclusions from all of history.
Yeah.
From the dawn of civilization, what worked, ways of governance, how it was governed, can crunch all of that information and utilize it in real time without emotional bias.
Mm-hmm.
So he's talking about, he wonders, I'm not saying he's saying this was a data point, but he wonders if leadership is being exposed as the flawed humans they are, whether it's the emotional reactions they're having, the poor decisions that they're making, the sexual misconduct that has gone on. AI won't do that. And AI knows the entire history of our nation, of our world, of our country, of our governance, of our decisions. And it's not influenced by any of that. And what's happening right now? Everybody's being exposed. Elon Musk and Trump are exposing all of the dirty laundry of the United States government. People are getting mad about that. People are also getting very mad at Elon Musk and Donald Trump for their intentions and their comments and their actions. And so someone's mad at everybody, it seems like, or there's just a lot of anger and frustration and fear and disappointment. How far beat down do we need to get until we accept, and this isn't me promoting it, I'm just asking the question, what's the point where we say AI is better? Let's take AI because AI is a lot better. Are we on that path? All right, let me backtrack here. I'm going to play one more clip, two more clips, talking about the nanotech. Okay, forgive me. Here we go.
Open potential that existed from it, you know.
It's a good
So,
upsell.
yeah.
It makes a great sales pitch. Not that you're making a sales pitch, but I can see this like, hey, everything's great. It takes away all your problems. There's just something about it. If something like this was to come to fruition, that just makes me uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie. It does sound like a
beautiful
scary
and
thing.
terrifying.
Absolutely.
Beautiful and terrifying.
And I did a show a few weeks ago. They were talking about, nanotech being everywhere, and maybe it's in the food. And then, it's weird because I think you mentioned at some point Ecuador. I don't remember where or why. But just the other day, Julian Assange was given some broadcast from the Ecuadorian embassy, and he mentioned dangerous nanodust or something. I forget his exact wordings.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he did say something like that along those lines. And then I think the broadcast was cut short shortly after. I did hear him make those statements. I haven't evaluated all that fully yet, so I'm going to give that disclaimer. But I did hear the clip of him making that statement. I don't know all the other context behind it.
All right, so that was me and Edward talking about a comment Assange had made, and Edward had mentioned Ecuador in his session, and it could just be a coincidence that Assange was in Ecuador when he's talking about evil nanodust. I don't have more information on that. I forgot completely about that, but that's another point of research that's worth looking into. I've got one more clip that I want to play here. Let's see. Here it is.
Oh, but I had to break myself out of the spell there for a second.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you. It's addicting. I mean, it sounds like a wonderful thing, and I think a lot of people will go for it. My fear is that it's altering the course of it. It could, if this is something that ends up coming to fruition, it could alter the course of human evolution. It could put us into a system where we're basically, our minds are enslaved and we're not aware of it. And some will argue that's already happened, but it just leaves us in, and it becomes the hive mind, the hive mentality. I mean, we're now the Internet of Things, and how are we going to be used as a resource? I mean, that's what scares me, and that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, when I did the final video, I sit down, I turn on the recorder, I don't plan out what I'm going to say.
Right.
I hit play and I go.
Right.
And, so in that final video, when I'm like, we have to hang on to our individuality at all costs. That's, that was in the moment.
Yeah.
And that is, I feel, Dennis, that the QAnon phenomena is part of a very big operation.
Yeah.
And it hits one part of the brain. It's like a signal to one part of the brain that wants that is craving that. Humans, they made us very afraid, and we want to feel like we have an understanding of what's going on. We want to feel in control. We want to feel that somebody's on our side.
So this then leads into talking about how the larger plan, humans are going to be happy and all that stuff, because I'm jumping around here. I love listening to Edward talk and share his ideas and his data. One more time, I want to stress, take it with a grain of salt. Edward was very clear about that. The data is the data, but remote viewing isn't always correct. And to use remote viewing information, it should never, and even intelligence professionals will tell you this, it should never be taken at face value by itself. It's interesting right now when it's just remote viewing and there's no way to corroborate it. If you have other sources of information that can corroborate it, then it becomes take it a little bit more seriously. Right now, I think there's correlations between some of the things that Edward said and some of the tech that is now available, some of the things Elon Musk is saying hasn't happened yet. I'm drawing an analytical conclusion and a big what if, but I think we're in the realm now of this could be possible. It could be possible. And that's why I think we need to be mindful as terms of what's happening here. This shock and awe stuff, this scary stuff, this hardship that we all might be facing. We need to have solutions in place to navigate the challenges that we're coming right now. But we also need to hold on to our humanity and our consciousness. And I'm not saying AI is the devil. I'm saying we need to be careful with how we use this tool. And we need to remember in our moments of weakness in the years to come when things are really hard and this seems like a great solution. And we may not be able to stop the system. I think that is the future of human society. But we may be able to hold on to some of our autonomy. And I think that meditation and traits like remote viewing to discipline the mind when you look at it as a mental martial art allows us to hold on to aspects of ourselves, because one of the things we can do is learn to recognize foreign signals coming into the mind. Now, are we strong enough to defeat if there's tech in our heads, if there's nanodust in our heads? I don't know. It might be there now. I don't know. But I'd like to think that there's hope. I'm reminded of Carlos Castaneda's books in The Active Side of Infinity. Don Juan Mattis was a shaman, and he says, the shaman trains in life to transcend death, to maintain his identity beyond death. And I think we're facing something similar. I don't think we're facing death, but I think we are looking at who am I? Who is the self? And it's, the influence that we're susceptible to. Can we really develop free will and exercise autonomy to hold on to who we are? There's a lot to think about. Proceed with caution. Investigate, validate, and verify everything that I said, because I cherry picked here a lot of different things. And I think, again, I've said it several times already. Each data point, I think, stands strongly by itself on its own. It's the analytical conclusions that I'm coming to, i.e., the hive mind, the mass takeover. I think we really need to proceed cautiously before we just say, oh my gosh, this is happening. But I think we do have a lot of correlation to things here. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Any other feedback or information you have that pieces things together on this. I'm sure there's a ton out there. These are just the things that came to me in the last couple of days. So Thank you. You can check out more of my work and find my books at sixthsensemedia.net. And you can find the wonderful work that we do at the Future Forecasting Group at futureforecastinggroup.com. Two places to get, I think, some really good information. So I'm Dennis Nappy II. This has been another episode of the Seeker Podcast. Remember to never stop questioning, keep an open mind, and let your intuition be your guide. Thank you.
I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend. Be water, my friend. Be water, my friend, my friend. Be water, my friend, my friend, my friend.